A sociological analysis of Richard Allen, justice and moral panic. When people hear that Richard Allen is appealing his conviction in the Delphi Murders Case, the reaction is often immediate and emotional. There's anger, frustration and disbelief. But today we're stepping away from the legal arguments and we're asking a different question. What does this appeal tell us about society? Not just about guilt or innocence, but about fear, trust, power, and how communities respond when something unthinkable happens. This is a sociological analysis of the Richard Allen appeal in the Delphi case. Delphi, Indiana is a small town. It's a tight-knit community, familiar and built on the assumption of safety. Sociologists call this a high-trust social environment where people rely on shared norms more than constant surveillance. The murders of Abby Williams and Liberty German shattered that trust. This wasn't just a crime, it was a rupture of the social order. In sociology, this kind of shock often leads to what is sometimes called a moral panic, a collective need to identify the threat, contain it, in order to restore a sense of normalcy. Because for years the lack of an arrest kept that panic unresolved. So when Richard Allen was arrested, it didn't just feel like progress, it felt like relief. And from a sociological perspective, Richard Allen's arrest very much functioned as symbolic closure. In a sense, it allowed the community to breathe again, institutions to appear competent, and grief to take a recognisable shape. And appeals can complicate that. Legally, appeals are routine, but socially they're destabilising because they reopen a question society desperately wants closed, which is, did we actually get this right? This is where sociology and public reaction can collide. An appeal is about procedure. The public response is about punishment and meaning. But Emile Durkheim, who we've discussed before, argued that punishment serves as a social function. It reaffirms shared values and condemns what society defines as evil. So when someone appeals in a case involving murdered children, many people hear justice is being delayed, or worse, the victims are being disrespected. Even if the appeal itself raises legitimate concerns, emotionally, it feels like an attack on closure to them. Sociologically, the appeal doesn't just put Richard Allen back in focus, it puts institutions on trial, as questions are raised about evidence handling, confessions, solitary confinement, and mental health deterioration. And these aren't just legal issues. They challenge the legitimacy of law enforcement, prosecutors, and the prison system itself. Excuse me. And when institutions feel shaky, society becomes anxious, because if the system failed here, where else could it have failed? Online true crime communities can play a major role in shaping how well appeals are received. Once a suspect becomes the story, narratives harden, doubt becomes betrayal, and legal nuance can get reframed as technicalities. Sociologically, these spaces function like informal courts. They don't prioritise due process, they prioritise narrative coherence. An appeal threatens that coherence, and that's why it often provokes outrage rather than curiosity. But Richard Allen's identity matters. He wasn't a drifter. He wasn't visibly deviant. He was local, employed, he was ordinary. This is what sociologists call cognitive dissonance. If someone like him can commit or be accused of such a crime, then the danger isn't external. It's embedded. Appeals prolong that discomfort by keeping ambiguity alive. Claims about Allen's mental deterioration and confinement conditions raise deeper sociological questions about state power. Michel Foucault argued that modern punishment often happens long before conviction. Solitary confinement, psychological breakdown, isolation. The appeal forces us to ask, are we seeking justice or coercion? And can society tolerate asking that question when emotions run this high? The Richard Allen appeal isn't just about one man. It represents our fear of unresolved evil, our need for closure, and our discomfort with uncertainty. And our tension between vengeance and fairness. Sociology reminds us of something uncomfortable but essential. A system isn't just measured by how it treats the innocent, but how it treats the accused. When emotions are at their highest. If you found this perspective helpful or thoughtful or challenging, please consider subscribing. This channel mainly focuses on crime, justice and society, not to sensationalise tragedy, but to understand what it reveals about us. Thank you for watching.